Hello and welcome to today's episode of the Grow My Salon Business podcast. I'm your host, Anthony Whitaker, and as always, it's great to have you here with us today. Now, there are only a small number of hairdressers who at any one time influence hairdressing all over the world. I've been fortunate enough to interview some of them on the podcast, and I always relish the chance to find out what it is that separates their ability from others. And what really separates them is how they think about fashion, about art, about people, about creativity, about culture, about collaboration, and how they channel all of that into their work. My guest on today's podcast is returning guest Eugene Souleiman, who is without doubt one of the very top session hairdressers in the world today. Eugene is that rare breed of hairstylist who really is an artist, as much as he genuinely dislikes being called that. His work inspires many other editorial hairstylists and salon hairdressers the world over. And along with two or three other people, he is at the very top of the pile. So without further ado, welcome back to the podcast, Eugene Souleiman.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be back, Anthony, and I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Good, me too. You know, I can't believe that the last time we spoke was 3 years ago.
No.
No, truly. Like I had a look and it was July 2021. There was a question I didn't ask you, which I want to ask you now, because it opens up a lot of areas about what you do and about what we all do as hairdressers. It's a simple question, but it's a big question at the same time. And so I'm interested to get your take on it. And that is, how do you define beauty?
I mean,
in 60 seconds or less.
Beauty for me really is all about energy and connection in its simplistic way. And I think we're all discovering beauty, aren't we?
Yeah.
Or I am.
Ongoing, evolving thing.
It's an ongoing conversation. And I find, right, it's a little bit like, if I look at it in the physical sense, right, there is like probably a type of woman that I'm really attracted to, right? That would be my obvious type of beauty, and that would be someone with dark hair, light skin, and very, very light blue eyes, right? That's the kind of woman that I would be attracted to. Having said that, they're probably not the only type of beauty that I'm attracted to. So I kind of feel that energy and character and the stories that a person has, their experiences, are the things that I find intriguing and attractive. You know, so beauty for me isn't purely a physical thing. It's an energy thing. It's someone's vibe, it's their story, you know, and I look at beauty in a very loose way, you know, and I think when people look at beauty, they think about beauty in a very generic sense, right? And I don't. I like someone that has a thing that is indicative to them. It's their personal thing, and that's the thing that I find beautiful. I remember once, right, when I was at Trevor's, I had a kind of a largish lady come in, and she had long, drab, curly hair, right, that she kind of scrunched dried and she put up, and she wanted a real complete change. And she came in and she said, literally, I want to cut all my hair off and I want it pink. She had a really effervescent personality. She was a larger than life character. She had like a big laugh, and she was a very bright person. And I remember, right, catching another hairdresser in the mirror, listening to our conversation and looking at their face. And I could tell what was going on by looking at their face. And they were processing it, going, "Oh my God, that's going to look terrible on her." You know, like, she's a big lady. She wants a round haircut. She wants this colour. She's got rosy cheeks, and, you know, aesthetically, right, that's not going to work for her. But I thought it would work for her. I thought she had the character to be able to pull it off. And it really would suit her and make her look more of who she is and make her become even more beautiful. And I went down that road, I said, yeah, great, you look amazing, let's do it. And the guy next to me was like, oh my God, I can't believe he's doing that. I can't believe he's doing that. And we did it, and she looked amazing. She was more of her. She looked more beautiful. It really suited her character, and it really amped her up as a person. So sometimes, right, doing the things that we are taught about proportion, anesthetics, and body shape don't really matter. The person matters, right? Their story matters.
Totally with you.
Their attitude matters. And she looked incredible. Like, she walked out of the salon and she felt like she was a foot taller. She felt like herself. And that for me was really very beautiful. And I felt she looked really beautiful and more attractive as a person because she was who she was.
Yeah, that sums up to me what suitability is. And I know I've said it before on previous podcasts, but the best definition I've heard of suitability is making someone look on the outside the way they feel on the inside.
Absolutely, yes.
Do you know what I mean? And that just sort of nails what you've said.
I mean, it made my day. I was so happy after doing that, right? And I'm still happy, right? Like 25 years later.
Yeah.
And I think to make that much of a difference for someone, to make them feel like them, and really happy about how they looked and how they felt. I mean, what a great trade. I mean,
exactly.
You think about it, right? And you work with people on that kind of level. It's great.
Yeah, and that's what your job is now, interpreting
Absolutely
the designer, the photographer, what they want that character to be like, to feel like, to look like, and that's your gift,
right? And
and
designers are very interesting people. They're extremely complex as individuals, right?
Yeah.
And that for me is probably one of the most exciting things I like about my job.
Yeah.
Because I feel I'm looking at what I do from a completely different perspective. I'm looking at it from someone else's perspective. And that's not necessarily a perspective that actually does understand hair or the nature of hair or how you would technically approach hair, right? Like some designer would say to me, I want the hair to be full, but I want it to look wet. Now, we know, right, if you make hair full, right, it needs to be dry, right, because it needs to be light, right? So it's like this contradictory creative process, and it really kind of, for me, it pulls out something that I absolutely love. I love that challenge of creating the impossible.
You've got everyone thinking about that now.
Eh?
How do you make it? You've got people listening to this thinking, how on earth can you do that? Make it full but look wet. Have you ever had that actual, brief given to you?
Of course, yeah.
Okay. How did you solve it?
I thought I need to create this support within the hairstyle to have wet hair fall over.
Yeah.
And what I did was I got an afro wig, and I literally cut out sections of it and built up root volume and hid it within wet hair. So the hair was actually full, but it looked wet.
Yeah, fantastic.
I mean, it's a challenge, right? But it's like such a great challenge because I always feel, right, that you can't really grow as a person, as a creative, within a trade, right, unless there is some adversity, right, or discomfort involved in whatever you do. And I've had such a great training from Trevor that is really been the underpinning, right, in my career. Like it really has. It's
Yeah.
totally made me. And the training was really hard. It wasn't. It wasn't a simple process. It was a lot of work. It was a lot of hours. There was a lot of practice. There was a lot of tea making. There was a lot of scabby hands and crack. You know, it wasn't. You know, it didn't come easy. Right? And I think that to be good at anything, right, you really have to put in the effort in your craft or whatever you want to be good at. You have to put in the work. And for me, that never came easy. You have to become comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Let me ask you this. What do you think it is that makes someone a creative? Is it a DNA thing? Is it the environment that they bring, that they're brought up in? Is it the what and the who you're exposed to? Like, where does that come from?
We go back to what we just said, right? Is discomfort, right?
Discomfort.
And maybe being most of the people that I know that are creatives have a very extrovert exterior, but internally they're incredibly introspective and introvert, right? Which means that they love people, they're inspired by people, they're inspired by their life, they're inspired by looking at things and experiencing things. But at the end of the day, they need to walk away and become alone. There needs to be silence for them to be able to process something.
Yeah. Okay. Now you talked
right.
You talked earlier on about dyslexia as well, and dyspraxia, and about being working class, etc., or coming from a working class background. And a lot of people would look upon all that as a disadvantage in life.
Yeah. Well,
but you've sort of turned it around and turned it into an advantage. Talk to us about how conscious that was or is.
Well, the funny thing is, right, this is really, it's really an unusual thing, because I think I can only speak about it from a very personal perspective. When I was really young, I did struggle a lot with reading, and, you know, certain letters like P's and B's were not very decipherable, right? And I's and L's, and, you know, and it was a real struggle. So when I learned to read, I kind of taught myself how to read. I could probably understand, right, maybe the first 3 words of a sentence. Then there would be another word, right, that followed, that I would have to think about or imagine was a word.
Yeah.
Right. When I got to that point, I would think, does this make sense? So I would go back to the beginning of the sentence and read out those words in my mind. And I thought, yeah, this does make sense, which meant that I understood that part of it, but then I had to read the next sentence. Right. So I was constantly like looking at information that I knew, that I understood, and used my imagination to create a word that I felt would make sense in that context, and then go back. And that's how I learned to read. I would read a sentence, right, go back to it, read part of the next sentence, imagine that word, go back to the first sentence. And then once I read a paragraph, does this all make sense? I would go back to the beginning of the paragraph and read. Right, so
it must have taken a long time.
Yeah. They say that you probably, if you're a dyslexic person or you're a dyspraxic person, that you probably think like 3 or 4 times more than a person that just thinks of something in a natural sense. So my mind is really quite intense, right? And I really have to break things down and analyze them. And also, I think learning to read in that way made me a visual person. It made me use my imagination. And I've always seen that as a strength because I've always felt that that's special to me.
Yeah.
I'd never
definitely.
ever seen it as a bad thing.
Yeah.
You know, in terms of convention, it's not ideal, but I've never wanted to do anything conventional in my life. So
Yeah.
I really feel that I'm kind of living
That's
my
strength.
purpose in that.
Exactly.
You know?
Yeah. One thing I want to ask you about, and it sort of fits in with those things we've just been talking about, is rules. Because a lot of hairdressers have, or not just a lot of hairdressers, a lot of people, period, they make sense of their life by having very fixed rules and boundaries that they have to operate in. So you'll get hairdressers that are very, these are the only tools you can use. You cannot use this tool.
Right.
Because that's naff, or you have to use this tool because that's the cool thing to do. And likewise, they'll have rules around different looks. Do you know what I mean? Like, so if you said, "Oh, I want a mullet," they'd throw you out, sort of thing. Now, you're not about rules. You're the antithesis of that. There's a complete freedom and flexibility about what you do, which I think is your strength. That you don't actually have any rules that sort of keep you boxed in, because that's how you continually seem to evolve. So talk to us about that.
You know what? I'm glad, right, that when I started my career, I had a very specific set of rules.
Yeah.
I'm really glad about that. There's nothing about that that I don't appreciate, because for me, they gave me a foundation, an understanding, and a rapport with hair. Right? They taught me that there is a process that can create an outcome. Right? And I think to take that journey where you understand that, I think is very important, because it helps you build a relationship up and an understanding of a medium. Right, and a familiarity with that medium. But there is a saying, right, that familiarity breeds contempt. And I think once you've grown your wings, you need to learn to fly. Right, and once you arrive at that point, you have to start stepping out of your boundaries and doing things that are against what you've been taught, or different to what you've been taught. And I think over a period of time, I think that's a natural process, right? Because I think what you do is you begin to re-educate yourself. Or for me, I did. And the only way I really kind of began to re-educate myself is I had to take myself out of the environment, right, that I was comfortable in, that was systematic. I had to take myself out of that environment, right? And that happened quite naturally for me because I was seeing a model, right? I went out with a model when I got introduced to people in the fashion industry. You know, it all happened very naturally. Like, nothing in my career, I can honestly say, has ever been premeditated. I've never ever had a plan. I've always worked with my environment, right? And to a certain extent, I've made some pretty damn good choices, right? And not good choices, but I've always been open. And I think that's the thing. I think, you know, whenever you've learned something, you still need to be open to new or territory that's unexplored, whether it's been explored before. But if it's not been explored for you on a personal level, you still have to go down that process. And I think there are certain people in your life, right, that you meet, and sometimes you can meet them for like, have a 10-minute conversation and gain so much from that experience, right? You know, and for me, there have been a few people in my life, right, that have really kind of changed my mindset, or helped to change my mindset. You know, one of them was Trevor, for sure.
Can I just jump in there and say, for people who don't know who you're talking about when you say Trevor, it's Trevor Sorbie. For anyone who's in any doubt, it's Trevor Sorbie.
Yeah.
So I know he was a major mentor of yours, and you worked with him for what, 15 years or something, didn't you?
Yeah, and also when I left Trevor's, there was Robert Lebetta and Kay Lebetta.
Right.
Incredible. Like, complete, you know, just flipped my world upside down, like Trevor did. You know, and you know, John Galliano and Yoji Yamamoto and Junior Watanabe and Tom Brown and Karl Lagerfeld, right, Amuchi Prada, like all of those people have had a massive impact on me.
Let me ask you about those sort of people. You have worked with everyone who's anyone, whether we're talking photographers, fashion designers, you know, artists, musicians, whatever sort of context. But you are very sort of humble about that. But oftentimes in our industry, or in any industry, success becomes someone's undoing because they lose that sort of humility. But with you being humble and curious and vulnerable and prepared to make mistakes and stepping outside of your comfort zone and all that sort of stuff is all part of your sort of creative journey. It's what makes you successful. But there's a certain amount of fear that comes with stepping outside of your comfort zone.
Sure.
So talk to me about the importance of humility in the creative process.
Well, I'll start off by saying I think vulnerability is probably the biggest strength that a person can have.
That anyone can have as a creative.
Anyone as a creative, or just in life. Like, to fall in love with someone and be vulnerable with that person, knowing that person could break your heart at any point in time, takes balls. You have to be brave, right, to be able to allow that to happen, right? Most people that I do know that come across as very strong people are actually quite the opposite of that. But I think, you know, vulnerability plays a massive part in being a creative individual or a hairdresser. You know, your failures are your biggest successes, because that's where they're where your lessons are. You know, like, you have to mess up to really understand something on a deeper level. You have to feel it, right? So I think that's really important to realize, right, that failing at something is not necessarily a bad thing. It's actually a very good thing to fail. And it's important that you do make mistakes and you feel the implications of the mistakes that you do make, right? Because they really stick with you, right? Experience, right, is the biggest teacher, right? One of the biggest teachers, right? And going into the unknown is one of the biggest teachers, because you're just so in a place, right? You have to know it, you know. So I think that plays a massive part in with creativity. I think creativity is, you know, does have this bravery to it, because you're not really sure, right, if it's going to work, are you? Right, and if you're not feeling any kind of insecurity or adversity, you could probably safely say that you're not really going anywhere that hasn't been gone before, or you're not doing something you haven't done before.
That's a great soundbite,
right? And you know,
it's a really good summary of that. Yeah,
and it's also a little bit like you can think of things in the most logical way, and you can say, oh, you know, like, what hairdressers need is this. right? There's a gap in the market, and it's this. Is this product, right? Is this technology, right? Maybe it's not, right? And I think that's a problem. I think a lot of people in lots of jobs, right, are cocoons, especially in jobs in, like, a lot of big companies and marketing. They're cocoons. They go to their job in the car, in the office for 9, maybe 10 hours, on the phone. Their lunch is Uber. They get back in the car to go home to have a shower, get back in another car to go to another restaurant, and then go home in the car. And they have no experience of real life and people and real diversity. One of my favourite things is actually to get on the tube. I love getting on the tube or a bus, and I love to walk. I love to see the world and feel part of the world that I'm in. And I think that's probably one of the things that has been incredibly inspiring to me. That I'm actually connected with the real world and another world, right, which is completely, a different place. But I managed to find an equilibrium with those two worlds creatively in my life. I do.
With what you were talking about before, that's I was going to talk about this later, but I think it's important to pick up on that, every generation, there are different things that influence social change. And sometimes it's like literally an explosion. You just referenced punk. That was, for you in the late 70s, early 80s was this explosion of punk. In the 60s, it was this explosion of pop culture. In the 70s, the beginning of the 70s, it was very much the sort of hippie era, etc. And every decade or so, there is, something, every generation that sort of upends everything. What I want to ask you about is, how would you describe the attitude or the energy today, whether it's of music or fashion or youth today, that is driving change? And how will that influence fashion the way the 60s did, the way the 70s did, the way the 80s did? What do you see happening? I mean, you're a dad, you've got young children.
That's a really great question, right? Because everyone I work with, right, I don't work with anyone my age, like no one. And I'm told, right, that I'm very young for my age. I'm a very young spirit, right? And I work with people that are probably like half my age, like literally. Could be their father, right?
Yeah,
literally, right? I don't work with any old people or people of my age group, right, or from my time anymore, right? When I started out, because I've always understood that I'm constantly learning. And whenever I get into a pattern, I feel really uncomfortable with myself, right? And I have to step out of that place. I have to grow. And I think when I look at younger people now, of particular age groups, right? I would say, like, like say 25, 21, 22 to like 30. I kind of feel a little sad for them, really, because I feel like that their life is constantly being watched. They spend so much time on projecting and looking for gratification, and looking for that next dopamine hit, which is like an Instagram post. Have I got 1,000 likes? Have I got this? Have I got that? I feel really sad for them, because I think they're afraid. They're really afraid to mess up, right, and to mess up in public. When I was a kid, right, I was messing up. Oh, Jesus Christ, all the time, and learning from it and enjoying that experience. I was really enjoying it.
When you talk about that generation compared to your generation, when you say you don't work with anyone your age anymore, but you have a lot of assistants and stuff that are on your team as you're doing shows, etc.
Mm-hmm.
How do you, with those younger people, because of what you said, I think nailed it, was really important about their life is always on show. They're always on social media. If they do something, if they mess up, it's on show forever, potentially. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Whereas you messed up, I messed up, but no one happens to know about it, and that's cool. It's all forgotten about. We move on. What I was going to ask you was, how do you develop that sense of curiosity and creativity in young people today, whether they're people on your team or whether you're Joe, the salon owner, and you've got young staff members? How do you develop that discipline, that curiosity, that creativity, that willingness to make mistakes and learn from them, etc.?
I think for me, it's really personal authenticity. I think that plays a big part in it. I think, just as an example, right, I would never ask an assistant to do something that I wouldn't do, right? And I probably am the hardest working member on the team. Well, I am, actually. So I think you have to lead, right? And the only way you can really lead a team of people is if they're excited and they have a respect for you.
So you lead from the front and you make mistakes and you step outside your comfort zone and you show them what that looks and feels like.
And I have no problem, right, with having an idea and saying to an assistant, I'm not really sure if it's going to work.
Yeah.
But I think we should try this, right? I think this is a lesson we can learn from. So
earlier on, you were talking about Trevor Sorbie and how he was, a mentor for you.
Yeah.
How important is it to have a mentor? You talked about how you've got people on your team that are half your age and younger, so people in their mid-20s, etc. Having you to look up to. How important is that? How important was it for you? How important is it for them? Because today, a lot of people want to jump the gun and they want to be, at the front of the line without, I hate that expression, you got to pay your dues, but things don't happen overnight. Do you know what I mean? You've got to have someone to show you the way.
Absolutely. I mean, things definitely don't happen overnight, but I think going back to what you just said and talking about mentors, yes, I do feel they're of the utmost importance. I feel for me, to be a good mentor, right, and to be a really helpful person and to pass on knowledge in whatever shape or form it comes in, you're the person that you are mentoring has to feel that what you're giving them is for their benefit, right? That you want to give them something because you like them and you want them to do well. Every assistant I've ever had, right, that has gone on and left to do stuff, I've always been incredibly happy for them. Always. And I've had some really amazing assistants, there's Duffy, Rudy Lewis. There's like so many people, right, that have been part of my team or have come from my family, much like I've come from Trevor's family. I've come from Trevor's stable. Trevor has been a massive mentor in my life. Huge. Right. So I think that's important. And I've always felt, right, that anything I've ever learned or any information I've ever been given from my mentor has come from a place of them wanting me to do well.
Okay. Before we were talking about different people you'd worked with, and so this is all part of the journey, and there were some big brand names out there, as designers, photographers, whatever. I'm always curious about how you feel, and this sort of fits in again with making mistakes and all that sort of stuff.
Right.
Do you ever feel intimidated? When you walk into the room for the first time and, Lucia Prada's there or John Galliano's there or, Karl Lagerfeld or whoever it was, do you ever feel intimidated?
I feel,
or do you just feel I'm here to do the job? They've chosen me to do the job, so I
no,
should.
I don't feel any of those things actually.
Okay.
I feel nervously excited, especially when I met John, because for me, right, I mean, I felt as if he'd done some really monumental things, right, that I've always loved and I've always looked at, and he has worked. He's worked many years for two of my favourite session hairdressers ever. Right, one guy is a guy called Julien Diz. Right,
Yeah.
to me, he's a god.
He's brilliant.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, and another guy called Orlando Peter, who's done some incredible work. Right, incredible, and inspiring work. So when I met John, I was really nervous but excited to be presented with this challenge because they're like incredibly big boots to fill. Right. And I took the job on, I accepted the challenge, and I was going to give it my all. Right. Literally just give it my all. And nothing less. Right. They were totally my intentions. And I always think that whenever you go into something, I think goes back to humbleness again, doesn't it, really? Because I think you can also go into a situation like that and feel, oh my God, I could learn so much. Right? And maybe I need to learn so much. So being humble and being excited and nervous, I think are three huge contributing factors, right, to really, to really push you creatively. And I think I've always been on a quest to search for new ways of doing things and learn new things. So for me, it was this golden opportunity. I literally felt like when I thought I knew quite a lot of stuff about hair, right, until I met John.
When you're talking about John, for anyone who doesn't know, we're talking about John Galliano.
Yes.
Now, obviously, when you work with him for the first time, you're not going to learn about hair from the technique point of view. He's a fashion designer. He's not going to say, you need to do this or that or blah, blah, blah. But what you're going to learn from him is about developing an eye, about a way to think, about understanding a character. Am I on the right track with all that sort of stuff?
Yeah.
Because that's the essence of it, isn't it? Like before you were doing hair and then all of a sudden it's like, oh my God.
I was like, oh my God, this is like completely changed my perspective on hair, because now I need to go back to the drawing board and create new techniques to be able to make these ideas a reality.
Yeah. Do you see that in young people on your team that come to join your team, but they're really excited because they know that they technically know what to do, in terms of working with hair and their hands and product and tools, etc. But there's a whole new world that they just haven't figured out yet. Do you see that in people?
Yeah, I totally do. Yeah, I definitely see that.
And is just working with you opening the door for them so that they go, oh my God?
You know what? I just kind of, whenever I approach anyone or, anyone new comes on my team, I kind of welcome them with open arms. Right. I think a lot of people, when they meet me, think I'm going to be like this really hard, Machiavellian taskmaster. I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm not at all. So I think that's quite disarming for them, right? They're like, oh my God, this is not the situation that I thought it would be. So immediately they're in a different space, and a space that they probably wouldn't have expected to be in. I think that really brings out the best in people. I think, having a sense of empathy and understanding I think is really very important. Like when I met John Galliano, he was like such a warm individual, and it was quite shocking to me that there was this hugely successful creative genius that was not a bastard, excuse my French.
Yeah.
He was actually really lovely. Yeah. And I was like, oh my God, I feel like I'm at home. And I felt valued as an individual. And I think, I really value the people that work alongside me, because I consider them like working alongside me. I don't consider them, minions at all, right? Because it would never happen if they weren't there. It would never happen.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Okay, so anyone who follows you on Instagram would have seen that you and Pablo Kuman, who used to be your first assistant, are in the process of opening something called the Wig Academy. So tell us all about that. What is the purpose or the goal of the Wig Academy?
Well, the Wig Academy, right, is I'm a contributor, and I have to be really honest about this. This is Pablo's idea, was Pablo's concept, and Pablo was an assistant of mine for a number of years, and a deeper friendship grew from our working relationship. So we have always springboarded ideas and supported each other. When he came up with the concept of the Wig Academy, I was like, oh my God, that's just like a brilliant idea. It's like a great idea. And I was incredibly excited for him. And I thought it was great. Right. And I've been using a lot of wigs that he has made with a company that he makes wigs for, and designs wigs and creates different ways of making wigs. And I've always been very proud of him and interested in what he's been doing. Like I've shown a lot of interest in, his career, as he's part of my family, right? He's like one of my children in a sense. And he said, how do you feel about doing a course, right? And I said, oh my God, yeah, I'd love to. That would be great, and that sparked off a conversation. It probably happened over a year ago. It was a very slow process. We've been working on this for a year, right? And the ideas have been building and they've grown, and we've found a space which we think is a white space, is a new space in terms of education. And, it's been a very interesting process for me, which I'm really, really enjoying. And for me, it's all about that. I'm hoping it's going to be received in a great way. I mean, it certainly feels like there's a hell of a lot of interest, which is great. And it's given me a lot of optimism. So, for the both of us doing this collaborative experience, right, with the Wig Academy has been a very enjoyable process. And we're doing so many other like additional things, like we're creating different head blocks with artists, different environments that we're going to shoot the videos in, competitions that we're going to create community, to bring people into a new environment, like assist on shows and shoots and stuff like that. There's lots of things, maybe collaborating with product companies, creating new tools, like really trying to
all sorts of potential. So it's the ethos of everything you've been talking about right through the last, since we began this podcast. It's like, don't be afraid to change and evolve and go with it and invent stuff in a fluid way.
Don't be afraid to be excited.
Yeah. So I saw you do something, I can't remember how long ago it was now. I'm going to say 3-4 years ago, with Hairdressing Live with Paul Davey. is it going to be that sort of thing where you have a live audience and people are working with you, creating looks, or is it going to be just a step by step? Here's a series of modules and a series of lessons, starting with the basics, working through to creative looks. What's that sort of
Well,
like going to be like?
Everything for me has been part of an ongoing process, right? Like what I did with hairdressing live. Obviously, I wanted to do something really quite different. Like I wanted to do it in front of an audience. I wanted that audience to be, people that I respected within the hairdressing industry. Like Trevor, Mark Hayes, Tim Hartley, Anthony. Nick Irwin. Like lots of people that were part of my community and history. I wanted it to feel as if it wasn't a sellout, me just selling out to create extra revenue to do something, right? I never ever want to feel like that. So everything that I intend on doing has to kind of be have a purpose, right, and a point of difference.
Yeah.
Right.
Is it mainly aimed at people who want to do session work?
No.
Or is it for salon use as well? Just anything to do with wigs?
No,
and
I think
creating more wider skill set.
It really is about a wider skill set and also kind of fine tuning sensibilities or taking visual sensibility in maybe a slightly different direction, changing the dynamics of education, creating a different dialogue.
Yeah.
I've always felt the best teachers for me were people that have always been excited about their work and realised that they don't know enough and they want to experience more things. And I think that's impetus, creative impetus, right? And I think that's the thing that really gets people to push boundaries.
I remember, I'm not sure if we've spoken about it on this one or previous discussions, where you told me about a careers advisor.
Yes.
Suggested to you a career in hairdressing, and they said you can go and do an apprenticeship or you go to a school, and you wanted to go to a school because you didn't want a job.
Yeah.
And so you found yourself at I think it was the London College of Fashion, doing a full-time course.
Yeah.
In wig making and barbering and cosmetology, the whole lot.
Yeah.
And I'm sort of reflecting on that. And then I'm also reflecting on what you said about Trevor and how with Trevor, you had to work and you had to study and you had to really learn the fundamentals of stuff. So what I'm asking you, is this course going to sort of be like that as well? Is it going to because so many hairdressers wouldn't have a clue what to do with a wig. So are you going to start right at the bottom of this is how you put a wig on, this is how you work with the hair, this is how
Pablo's already done that, right?
He's done all that, right?
He's done all of that. Detailing hairlines, products that you use, little tricks and things like that.
Yeah.
I am really kind of taking that further and turning it on its head.
Yeah. Okay. So you're doing the whole creative.
Quite literally, I'm going to be looking at construction of wigs and how to use the construction of a wig as a source of inspiration. I'm going to be talking about how to use wigs in a different way, not the traditional way.
Yeah.
So I guess it would be a haute couture vision.
Okay.
Education, right?
Cool.
It would be like very bespoke and directional, and also coming from a different perspective. As you know, I use wigs a lot in work that I do because, I can't make a girl with blonde hair black, right, on a shoot or on a show unless that's the look that they want to go for. right? That's a whole other area. So therefore, I have to rely on a wig or a hairpiece, right, to be able to do that. So we use wigs, session hairdressers, a lot. Even though you might not even know that we are using wigs, but we do.
Yeah.
And I would like to push that concept even further.
Before you and I started hairdressing, so this is in the 60s, I know that Sassoons, even then, Sassoons had a wig room.
Yeah.
So in the 60s, wigs were a real thing, that a girl had some wigs at home in her top drawer that she'd put on to go out as a fashion accessory. Yeah. Of course, 70s, 80s, 90s, etc. That's just like died right off. And there's a whole generation of people that think of wigs as either being something for, cancer patients, which is a fantastic, use of wigs, and it's been great. But I suppose what I'm asking you about is, do you see that there could be sort of a return of a wig for being a more, fashion accessory? Do you see any return to that? Is that sort of maybe some of the thinking behind the Wig Academy, or not necessarily?
I can't speak for Pablo, but I can speak for myself.
Yeah, of course.
It's something that I would like to see a return to, for sure. And quite simply, the reason why I love wigs, right, is it gives a person a sense of freedom, because it means they can change the way they look whenever they want to look a specific way, obviously. So it allows a person to show different sides of their personality. So yes, I would like to see a return to wigs. I think wigs now probably are a little more on the natural side. I love the idea with a wig, right? You can do something that's probably taking you about 4 hours to do, or 6 hours to do, and just be able to put it on.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, especially for what you do.
Time do they right now? We live such busy lives.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Last time when we spoke, I said to you, "What do you want to do next?" And you said, and I've written it down. You said a Hollywood movie. So tick, you've done that, because at the time we spoke, you hadn't done it. So you ticked that box. Okay. You said a product line. As far as I know, you haven't ticked that box. You also said. You said an educational website for young hairdressers. Well, I'm going to say you've ticked that box, with Pablo. You said an agency for young hairdressers to have them on your books. Have you done anything along those lines yet?
Yeah.
No? And then the last thing you said was to make the industry bigger, which was intriguing. So it's interesting. I mean, as I said, it's only 3 years since we spoke, but you've ticked those things off the list, which is fantastic. Where can people connect with you? On Instagram or other social media channels?
Can we keep it to one channel, Instagram?
Yep. Yeah, definitely. Okay, so it's Eugene Souleiman on Instagram.
Yes.
And also the Wig Academy on Instagram, and the Wig Academy.
I'm very excited about doing.
Right. Yeah, it's very exciting. I love all the stuff that you got on the Instagram page for that. So I'll put those links on our website, growmysalonbusiness.com, and in the show notes for today's podcast. Now, if you're listening to this podcast with Eugene Souleiman and have enjoyed it, do me a favor, share it to your Instagram stories, and don't forget to write us a review on Apple Podcasts. So to wrap up, Eugene, thank you once again for being on this week's episode of the Grow My Salon Business podcast.
An absolute pleasure, Anthony. Thank you.